Hi folks, it's Coach Kelvin here from the WeRun Virtual Run Club and WeRun Coach for Leeds and surrounding areas, as well as online coaching. Um, in this little video, I'm going to talk about spring races because spring races are actually fairly close. Some are as close as kind of 10 weeks away, others maybe more in that kind of 16 to 18 weeks, almost getting into the summertime. Um, I'm gonna focus a little bit more on the marathon, but it's relevant to other distances as well. But something that I sort of see at this time of year this sort of distance out from an event is runners sort of making mistakes that they didn't need to make. And I kind of say that, if your training's going really, really well, stay cool. And if your training's just kind of going all right, stay cool. And if your training's not going quite as well as you would have liked, stay cool. And what do I mean by stay cool? I mean, don't just suddenly do something crazy because we often see runners doing crazy things as they get closer to a race. So let's just look at some kind of almost mistakes or little tips for you in terms of spring racing. Um, so if we look at where we are now, it's wise to progress from where we are and not where we're supposed to be. And by that, I mean that, if your train hasn't gone exactly to plan, don't just kind of suddenly go, right, I'm going to get on it and I'm going to jump on the plan from here and have this kind of big increase in training load. We're just kind of progressing at the speed that we're progressing. And if some training has been missed out, you might need to take a step back a few weeks and just miss out those like kind of the sort of bigger weeks that are closer to the event itself. It's absolutely fine to do that, and it's much better to do that than it is to pretend that training's gone better than it has. If you'd like any tips on that, if training's not gone quite as well as you would have liked, pop them down in the comments below, and we'll do our best to help you out. The other mistake that I see people making on a fairly regular basis, particularly in marathon training, is doing the kind of hardest run. So it doesn't always have to be the longest run, but maybe the hardest run, the one that's got some kind of goal pace work in there. And they do it 2 weeks out. So they do the hardest run and then they taper into the race. That's super risky. You're better off doing that kind of biggest workout about 4 weeks out. And 2 weeks out, you want a strong workout, but it certainly shouldn't be the hardest workout in your training. The other thing is, we don't want to make any big changes. Maybe think that we can do something that's going to suddenly kind of help us. I saw a running club the other day, and they were starting to do some like speed work, and they were focusing the sort of speed work sessions on like, things you can do to improve towards the Leeds Marathon. Leeds Marathon's in like 10 weeks' time. You certainly don't want to be making any big changes to your training and adding anything new in there. And the other mistake that we see people make is too much focus on the long run. It is more about sort of global volume. And although the long run is important, it's not as important as people think. And global volume, week after week, month after month, is definitely more important than trying to hit some sort of monster long run. While we're on the subject of the long run, I've mentioned this before in another video. Aerobic adaptations max out at about 3 hours. So we normally cap long runs at 3 hours. And if 3 hours gets you to 14 miles, that's cool. But it might be then worth doing, maybe something like an 8 or a 10 miler the day before. So again, we're compressing some of that global volume into a couple of days. The other thing to do is look at race day and work backwards a little bit. Look at that 2 week taper and look at what precedes that, and look at where you are now and try to sort of bridge some gaps in the right way, rather than having big kind of sort of steps up there. Um, The other thing that's wise to do is, unless you're a really experienced marathon runner, the long run every other week is probably a good idea. Working on like three builds and a download, and you do your long runs on week one and week three. And week two, you can maybe put a little bit of a kind of, mid-length tempo effort in there. And then your download week, again, a mid-length and maybe super easy. Or if you feel like you're not fully absorbing your training, a shorter super easy run on that download week. The other thing that I see on a fairly regular basis is people doing practice races. So you're training for a marathon, and like 4 weeks out, we see people doing like a half marathon and running it really hard. If somebody does that, they've just destroyed their marathon, because it'll take too long to recover from that race. So it's cool to do practice races, just that sort of, what do we eat the day before? When do we sort of get up in the morning? When you get there, where are the loos? How do I do a warm up and things like that? But if you do a half marathon as part of your training, make sure it's either part of your long run progression, or it's just run super easy. And when we say easy for a half marathon, even 13 miles at marathon pace would be probably too chunky for most runners, unless your volume is pretty high. The last thing that I'm going to mention is underfueling. So as training increases, a lot of people don't up their nutritional intake. So we need to make sure that we're, padding some extra carbohydrate around harder efforts and longer runs, but just in general as well, bringing some more fuel into that day-to-day nutrition. And also making sure that the sort of long run nutrition's kind of on point as well. We definitely kind of want to be hitting that sort of, 250 to 350 calories an hour, and 500 or 600 milliliters an hour, whilst we're running on those longer runs. While we're on the subject of hydration, also make sure that we're getting that kind of 1.5 to 2 liters of water a day, plus 500 to 600 mils for every hour of exercise that we do, sipped gradually throughout the course of the day. So I hope that all makes some sort of sense. And if you've got any questions that are a bit sort of personal to your training, just pop them in the comments below. And you can email us as well. I'll pop my email address in the in the sort of text of the video, and also in the app. There's the kind of ask a coach little tab where you can ask a coach. So if you don't want to put a question in the comments, you can ask questions in that way too. So I hope that was useful. And for now, happy running.